My sister and I were both reborn at the same time. My sister rushed into my husband's arms overnight, crying and sobbing. I'm wrong. I found that you are the one I love the most. In my previous life, she fell in love with a hooligan, broke off the engagement and ran away. She made a fuss about wanting to drink plain porridge, saying that none of us understood love. It was I who married my childhood sweetheart, Dylan. In her place, my childhood sweetheart husband's eyes were bloodshot. He pinched her waist and said, "It's good that you're back. I'll spoil you to death." I sneered beside them. My dear sister. Is it possible that you were a fool before being reborn, and still are after being reborn? As soon as I woke up in bed, I was surprised to find that my body had become younger. After confirming it again and again, I realized that I had been reborn. At this time, it was the 3rd month after I married Dylan. Recalling my past life, if it were a novel, I must have been the type of the female led in a tragic love story, in my previous life. When I was just born, the Taoist priest invited by my grandparents said that I had a bad fate and would bring bad luck to my relatives. So I needed to live in the Taoist temple until I was 16. Although my mother was reluctant to part with me, just at that time my father had a car accident, so they immediately sent me there. To ease the longing for me, at my father's suggestion, my mother went to the orphanage to adopt my sister. As a result, after she was brought back, my father didn't love me, my mother didn't care about me, and I also suffered from school violence. Finally, when I met someone I liked, he actually liked my sister. I have to say that I really liked Dylan for a period of time in my previous life. He was a favored son of heaven and was gentle to others. It was understandable that I fell in love with him, but I had always kept this love silently in my heart, because I knew that Dylan and my sister were childhood sweethearts and had an innocent relationship. However, my sister fell in love with the cool and arrogant school bully Rex. She skipped classes and fooled around with him every day. Rex's family was very poor. His father was a gambler and his mother was nowhere to be found, apart from his good looks. Being pure was his biggest advantage. My parents were heartbroken and scolded and beat her. Dylan also tried to persuade her to come back time and time again. But my sister stubbornly raised her head. With a determined look on her face, "We are true love. I just love the plain porridge he cooked for me, which makes me feel the taste of love. You are all so cold. You don't know what love is at all." My parents were so angry that they had a headache and locked her up. As a result, my sister threatened to go on a hunger strike, crying and making a fuss all day long. Always saying things like, "I just want to be with Rex. Why do you restrict my freedom?" Sure enough, since I'm not your biological daughter, you are so autocratic. She almost drove my mother mad. Finally, heading fulfilledly, my sister got pregnant. Rex was afraid of taking responsibility and ran away. Then my sister was disheartened and had an abortion. She was ready to marry Dylan. But as soon as Rex showed up, my sister was like being bewitched and ran away at the wedding banquet. After weighing the pros and cons, I married Dylan in her place. After marriage, Dylan couldn't forget my sister and kept giving me cold violence. He often said things like, "Even if you get my body, you can't get my heart. I've always loved your sister. Don't be so cheap." I also gradually changed from longing for love at the beginning to focusing on making money. Eventually, having fulfilled retribution, I became a female president. Fortunately, having fulfilled retribution, now that I'm reborn, I'm no longer the cowardly, timid and pitiful me before. As soon as I went out and went downstairs, I saw my nominal husband drinking coffee at the table without even looking at me. I sat down and didn't pay attention to him. I ate, while thinking about the future. Calculating the time. My sister should be living a happy cohabitation life with the hooligan now while my parents and brother were still in tears. But what I didn't expect was that the doorbell suddenly rang. As soon as the servant opened the door, the figure of my sister, whom I hadn't seen for a long time, rushed in. "Brother Dylan, I miss you so much." My sister didn't have the previous glamorous look. Her hair was withered and yellow and her figure was haggard, but she was still good looking. Perhaps there were still some obstacles on the road to pursuing true love. Dylan immediately looked at my sister in surprise and distress. His lips trembling. Candy. You're not dead? My sister's eyes were full of tears. In my sister's previous life, after she eloped with Rex and got on the plane, that plane crashed. Her body was never found. In addition to their pain, my parents blamed everything on me. They publicly announced that they only had my sister as their daughter. My brother also made things difficult for me everywhere. I felt so isolated and helpless. At that time, I was forced to suffer from depression. It wasn't until many years later when my sister came back home with a sick body that I knew that she and Rex hadn't got on that plane at all. No matter how hard my family had been looking for her all these years, she was content to be with Rex and didn't inform her family at all. After experiencing domestic violence, multiple miscarriages, and even taking some bad things in the end, my sister finally seemed to understand who was good to her and became a bit smarter. Dylan also ridiculously felt a little guilty towards me. My sister liked to come to my house often under the pretext that she was injured and needed Dylan's company. And Dylan never refused her. As a result, a few days later, Rex came to my sister with a knife like a madman. I was directly pushed out by the panicked sister to block the knife. Then everything went black. Before I died, it seemed that I also heard my sister's resentful voice. Sister, all of this should have been mine originally. You've enjoyed it for so long. It should be okay for you to block the knife for me. Right? And now, my sister was crying with pearly tears, telling the fact that she didn't get on the plane. Dylan was holding the resurrected sister full of pity. I love you too. It's good that you're back. I'll spoil you to death. Seeing the complacent look in my sister's eyes when she looked at me, I knew that she had also been reborn. The two of them began to perform how hard it was for them to part in the living room, right in front of me. They were almost on fire with passion. Finally, having fulfilled my sigh, my sister finally noticed me with my arms crossed in the corner. She shyly separated from Dylan. Sister, I just couldn't help myself. You can understand that, right? I frowned and was just about to speak when Dylan, like a brave warrior, blocked in front of my sister. You should know that I've always liked Candy. Now that she's back by my side, you should step aside too. I rolled my eyes. Can you change the bad habit of talking to yourself? My sister's eyes rolled. Sister, I know I'm sorry for you about this. But brother Dylan and I are true love. It's you who intervened in our relationship. Now we can each return to our own positions. Dylan also looked disgusted. Don't dream of staying by my side anymore. You've always been just a substitute. Looking at the two creatures opposite, who couldn't understand human language, I spread my hands. Okay. Go and tell my parents yourself. Don't expect me to be the bad guy. Let my sister tell our parents about the fact that she's alive by herself. Give them a surprise. Sure enough, it wasn't long before my mother called and asked me to go home. When I stepped into my parents' house again now, it felt like a lifetime had passed. In my previous life, they didn't want to see me. I didn't see them again until my sister came back. At that time, my mother wanted to say something to me, but her attention was diverted by my sister's crying. In the end, she didn't even call my name and just focused on comforting my sister. My father and brother were even colder to me. At this time, my parents and brother were sitting on the sofa, talking softly to my sister. My sister had changed into a set of clothes and dressed up. She was held in Dylan's arms. My brother looked at Dylan with a jealous look in his eyes. I secretly rolled my eyes in my heart and said coldly, "What do you want me for?" A trace of embarrassment flashed across my mother's face. But she still insisted on speaking. "Ava, since your sister is back now, and let's each return to our own positions. Coincidentally, young Master Leon has just returned from abroad. Would you consider meeting him?" I said coldly. "What do you mean by each return to our own positions? Let her be Mrs. Dylan? Was it me who ran away from the wedding publicly? What nonsense are you talking about? Shake your head and see if you can hear the sound of seawater? And that young Master Leo is good at eating, drinking, warring and gambling abroad. How can you open your mouth to say such a thing? It's like eating melon seeds in the toilet." My mother was speechless for a moment. Perhaps it was the first time she saw me being so assertive. After all, In order to win their love before. I used to be so timid and cowardly. My brother couldn't stand it and immediately accused me. Speaking forcefully. How can you be so cold-blooded? She's your sister. She has suffered so much. It's okay if you don't comfort her. How can you say such things? What are you? If my sister hadn't run away from the wedding, would it be your turn? A bumpkin? Yes. In his eyes. I was an uncouth person who couldn't be on the stage. A surge of anger rushed straight to my head. I didn't hesitate to retort. Whose fault was it that I grew up in the Taoist temple? Was it my choice? Who is my sister? Is she related to me by blood? Hearing this, my mother's eyes were filled with tears. She covered her chest, looking as if she was in great pain. My father should be a model of an early domineering president. He had always been very affectionate to my mother. Seeing my mother like this, he also got angry. Apologized to me immediately. What kind of behavior is this? I spat and said without hesitation what was on my mind in my previous life. Apologize for what? Since I came back. Have you fulfilled your responsibilities as parents? I didn't grow up depending on you. Whenever something happened, you pushed me out to take the blame. What? Am I different from a rag? Just use me wherever you need me? After saying these words, besides feeling relieved, I also felt a little sad in my heart. These words made my parents' faces turn green and then white. My brother suddenly stood up, clenched his fists, looking as if he wanted to rush up and hit me. If it weren't for us, could you marry into the Dillon family? Could you enjoy all these riches and honors? Obviously, you took advantage of my sister's absence. You're so shameless. How did you become such a shameless person? I didn't respond directly to his words. I just looked at him and my sister back and forth. Are you sure she's just your sister? My brother seemed to be stabbed in the heart. He took a step back. His face flushed, and began to stammer. My sister's expression also changed. She started crying as soon as she wanted to. Sister. What are you talking about? Liu Ershu. I already know I'm wrong. Don't scold me. I know you're jealous of me. But it seemed that after the previous life, my sister finally had a bit of intelligence and knew how to pretend to be weak. Looking at the farce of this whole family, I said firmly, it's okay to get a divorce. But I want a share of the Dillon family's group. Dillon frowned and hesitated. You're too greedy. That's impossible. I then turned to look at my sister and said with a smile, Sister. Dillon and I have been married for 3 months. In bed. He's as passionate as fire. Maybe his heart is truly thinking of you. But his body. Look. He doesn't even want to get divorced now. At the end of speaking, I smiled secretly, with mockery towards my sister. Dillon roared. What nonsense are you talking about? In fact, he hadn't touched me at all in these 3 months. But my sister is so infatuated with her husband that she can't think rationally at all. Sure enough, my sister stopped crying and instead said in a disbelieving tone, Brother Dillon. How could this be? She must be lying to me. Right? Dillon hurriedly explained gently. I turned around and left. Next. My dear sister will help me get divorced. In sharp contrast to my life. My sister is the beloved female lead. After more than 10 years of relationship, my sister has completely replaced me long ago. Mom, Dad, and my brother all dote on her. Even when I came back, their care for her didn't change. For my parents and brother, I had expectations at first in my previous life. However, every time my sister shed tears, my brother would rush out and scold me. Don't bully Xiaogui. You ill-mannered thing. He never thought that I was also his sister and always called me by my name directly. Mom and Dad disliked my unrefined appearance, my always cold face, and that I wasn't as obedient as my sister. I still remember it to this day. In high school, I studied hard and got the first place in the midterm exam. I excitedly took my report card home. I was so excited. Mom and Dad would surely praise me. Right? Then, hadn't fulfilled my obsession. Would they think I was a bit more useful? At the dinner table, before I could say anything, my sister spoke first. Mom, Dad, brother. I didn't do well in this exam. I failed several subjects. Woo woo woo. While speaking, she was also crying. Mom felt extremely distressed and comforted her repeatedly. It's okay. It's okay. My dear is always my baby no matter how many marks you get. Dad and brother quickly picked up the dishes my sister liked for her. At that time, the naive me just felt that the atmosphere at the dinner table was not good, so I thought if I told them my ranking, would Mom and Dad be happier? As a result, after I did that, my brother angrily shouted, "Candy is already so sad, and you still say that? Are you deliberately hurting her feelings?" I was at a loss and quickly said, "Sorry. I didn't think of that." Mom also glared at me, "How thoughtless you are. Are you trying to make me angry? If you were half as cute as Candy, how could I have given birth to a daughter like you?" Even Dad said coldly, "If you don't want to eat, you can get out." I felt like I was the sinner of this family at that time. I was so envious of my sister who was surrounded by them. That meal was especially bitter with tears mixed in. They didn't know that at school, because my sister was ambiguous about my identity. Many people thought I was the daughter of a mistress. They ridiculed and cursed me. Even if I explained, no one believed me. Only academic achievements were the only thing that could prove myself. But even this was denied by my family. I don't know how my sister managed it. But Dylan still agreed to give me 5 of the shares. I also readily went to get divorced. Coming out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, Dylan curled his lips and crossed his arms. Woman, even if you beg me in the future, I won't let you come back." Hearing this, I quickly ran away, far from it. It seemed that Dylan cursed a lot more, but I just ignored it as if it were the barking of a dog. Due to my sister's death, before, Dylan didn't want to work for a long time. He was sentimental every day. I was the one who kept an eye on things in the company for him. During that period, I worked from 9 to 9. 6 days a week. I was so tired that I fell asleep as soon as I got home every day. But I also managed to get myself promoted to the position of director and could handle things independently. However, just a few days after the divorce, Dylan, as if suddenly remembering that he still had to work, came to the company ostentatiously with my sister. Since I had always concealed my identity in the company, most of my colleagues didn't know that I used to be Dylan's wife. I could still hear the discussions among the colleagues around me. Oh, are those the young master and his girlfriend? They're so close. Maybe they're getting married soon? His girlfriend is quite good looking." I was called to Dylan's office. My sister was wearing a professional suit and was clinging to Dylan like a delicate little bird. Dylan frowned and his tone was full of impatience. "Hand over your work. I plan to let Candy take over your position." My sister smiled mockingly. "Sorry, sister. I might become your boss later." Remembering my subordinate colleagues who had fought with me before, I decided to make one last effort. I stared at my sister firmly. "Are you sure you want to do this? I remember you majored in art in college. Which has nothing to do with this position at all. Oh, by the way, at that time, my sister was still in college when she was involved with Rex. As a result, she neglected her studies afterwards, failed too many courses, and didn't get her degree certificate." My sister covered her chest as if she was scared. "Ouch. Sister, you can find another job. What's the point of lingering around Dylan? I'm worried that something might happen between you and Dylan. You can understand me, right?" I was so angry that I laughed. I turned to look at Dylan and said seriously, "You should know how hard I've worked. Before I came, the company's performance was on the decline. It was I who lead the project team to work day and night on projects and negotiate cooperation to boost the performance. Now you want to get rid of me after I'd done all the hard work? Were those days and nights of sleepless work all in vain?" After hearing this, Dylan touched his nose guiltily. And then he put on a fierce front but was actually weak inside. "So what? Can't the company operate without you? Who do you think you are?" Although I had known for a long time that Dylan wasn't a normal person, I was still speechless. "Whatever you want. Just let my dear sister take charge." After Dylan directly announced the appointment, there was an uproar in the company group. Several colleagues raised objections, but they were all suppressed. More people remained silent because everyone knew that my sister was a connected person. My sister, wearing a professional minicart, walked to my workstation with a haughty look and knocked on the table arrogantly. "Sister, pack up your things and get out." I smiled. "Sister, have you never worked before? If the company fires me on its own initiative, it has to pay compensation or severance pay. Let the HR come and talk to me." Seeing that there was no one around, my sister's tone became vicious. "I don't care about HR or not. I'm telling you. I'm determined to get Dylan." After going around in circles, I realized that Dylan is the best to me. I don't want to be as miserable as I was in my last life. I want to succeed. I want to be rich. Then her voice lowered. "As for the good life you've enjoyed all your life, Kun, that was all given by me. Now that I, the rightful owner, am back." Looking at my sister's jealous and distorted face now, I remembered that although she used to be shallow, she was also quite cute. It seems that the experiences in her previous life have really made her grow a lot, but she still doesn't understand the importance of independence. Getting a second chance was originally a gift from heaven, but my sister only relies on different men to make up for her regrets. She thinks that as long as she chooses the right man, she can succeed. She's like a cute and gentle daughter flower that only clings to its host. If she can't stand on her own feet, no matter how many people she clings to, she's likely to fail in the end. After all, just because a fool is reincarnated doesn't mean they're not a fool anymore, right? I directly ignored my sister's tantrum and went about my own business leisurely. The HR came over helplessly. When the HR came to communicate with me, his face turned green. There was no other reason. My salary plus performance bonus in these few months was quite high. It was really a large sum of money. The HR quickly said, "I'll go back and discuss it first." On WeChat, there were quite a few familiar colleagues who came to comfort me. "It's okay, Ava. In our hearts, the position of director has always been yours. Ava, why don't you just resign? If they don't want you here, there are other places that will." These words warmed my heart. In the end, because of being reluctant to part with the money, Dylan directly ordered that I be transferred from my position and become my sister's subordinate. I took a laid-back attitude. I only completed the work that I was supposed to do every day and punched in and out of work seriously. As for the rest, I just watched the drama between her and Dylan. I often heard my sister's copious voice in the office. "Ouch. This quotation? I don't know how to handle it. Why don't you just do it the way you did before? Do it yourself. Don't you even know this? I have to do everything. Use your initiative. What's the use of the company paying you a salary?" Many colleagues were left speechless. But there were also some people who started to flatter her. Under the flattery of others, my sister, who already had no idea of her own abilities, became even more arrogant. She was radiant all day long and liked to deliberately hold Dylan's hand and walk around to show off their love. To torment me, my sister often sent me messages in the middle of the night, asking me to get up and do things. I just pretended not to hear them. The next day, my sister still criticized me indirectly at the meeting. "Some people nowadays don't work when they get home. How can this be okay? Does the company pay you just for you to work those 8 hours? You workers should have the attitude of workers." The colleagues below were all very angry. Probably because my sister wanted to quickly establish her authority. I heard that other colleagues had also been harassed by my sister after work hours. It's a pity that my sister knew nothing about work. Often, when she made a voice call saying to change a document, after an hour of changing, only 3 words were actually changed. That's okay. I don't know if she learned something from the compensation incident about me. My sister also started to target the travel expenses. One day, she asked colleagues to take the high-speed train instead of the plane. And the next day, she thought the hotel was too expensive and almost wanted colleagues to sleep on the street. My sister was also complacently making reports saying that she had saved money. Oh right. That report was also done with the help of my colleagues. After all, my sister couldn't even figure out the simplest office software suite. Finally, heading to February, after a month had passed, my sister managed to disgust everyone in the company. For some colleagues who were truly skilled and didn't lack money for the time being, they had already started to prepare to jump ship one after another. thanks to the shares I got as divorce compensation from Dylan. I sold them early and got a large sum of money. With this money, I registered a company with business similar to that of Dylan's family company. Since I had led them in work before, many people trusted me and came to work for my company one after another. Even the board of directors had heard about these things and went to find Dylan. But the next day, my sister went to Dylan's office, crying. Dylan immediately felt heartbroken and gently comforted her, while also cursing those old fogies at the same time. All of the above were gossipy news passed on to me by my secretary colleague. I was amused when I heard them. In the past, Dylan seemed like a normal person. Why did he seem so stupid now? Or was it that stupidity was contagious? Under my sister's persistent efforts, the company lost several big orders. Now there was a shortage of working capital for the company's operation. In order to save money, my sister found me and several other directors respectively and tried to persuade us patiently. The company's performance is not good, so I'll give you 5,000 yuan as the year-end bonus this year. Under normal circumstances, I would get 30,000 yuan as the year-end bonus. Even though I didn't lack money, I was still angered and amused. What does the company's poor performance have to do with me? Also, having full sauvé, sir. Aren't you afraid that saying the company's performance is poor will affect the stock price? My sister curled her lips disapprovingly and glared angrily. Don't be so shameless. Don't you know that the job market outside is very tough? Do you think you can find a good job if you leave this company? What are you? You're just a jinx. I'm the one with a golden finger. I was speechless towards her and nodded vigorously. Yeah. Right. Right. After that, I went back to find those lost business partners and signed several orders in the name of my company. Many people on the board of directors were also disappointed with Dylan, and I took the opportunity to extend olive branches to them. When there were fewer and fewer people in Dylan's company, and its performance was getting worse and worse, it seemed that Dylan finally remembered me. He called me to his office and tried to slow down his tone as much as possible. Viva. Don't be angry. Is it okay if I let you come back to be the director? I looked at him as if he were an idiot. Do you think I'll come back just because you say so? Dylan got a bit angry and slapped the table. Have you had enough of playing hard to get? I've already given you a way out. With that superior look in his eyes, people who didn't know would think that I was begging him. It seemed that I had been too nice to him before, which made him lose his sense of direction. I directly retorted, not enough. Don't you want your sweetheart to take this position? Then let her work hard. Dylan was so angry that the veins on his forehead bulged. He took several deep breaths before slowly saying, all right, you take this position. Stop making trouble. I'll talk to Candy. I simply gave him the middle finger and completely ignored his impotent fury, then turned around and left. I resigned directly because I also needed to concentrate on starting my own business. But my colleagues who were still in the company shared gossip with me every day. The business world was always changing rapidly. Under my sister's messing around, the company had already fallen far behind others. Even though Dylan finally hard and removed my sister from her position, it was already too late. That day, my sister also had a big fight with Dylan and left. Through the open office door, we could see Dylan covering his face with his tired hands. Taking this opportunity, many shareholders started to sell their stocks, causing the company's stock price to plummet. Dylan was in a terrible mess all day long. The problem was that he had let go of the company for too long, and it wasn't easy for him to pick it up again now. My sister was being sulky and didn't come to the company for several days in a row. Just when I was watching the joke, my brother surprisingly called me. His tone on the phone was very unfriendly. Why did you bully Candy again? I heard that you refused to go back to work when you were asked to. What do you want? Do you want to reach for the sky? I looked up at the sky speechlessly. Are you Candy's dog? You do whatever she says? I simply hung up on him. Later, I heard that the Ava family also injected capital, but it was already too late to turn the situation around. Dylan kept selling the company's assets, causing the company to shrink a lot. Now it was just barely making ends meet. My sister and Dylan quarreled every day, always saying things like, "Don't you love me anymore? Why don't you accompany me anymore?" Why are you being so mean to me? Love without material support is just like a pile of loose sand. As for me, having fulfilled my assertion, relying on the experience from my previous life, my company was developing vigorously. When I went out, people would also call me President Ava. Just when my career was developing quite well. After a long time, my parents called me and told me the news that my brother was going to get married. Only then did I remember. In my previous life, it was also at this time that the Ava family had a financial crisis and urgently needed capital injection. So, my brother was forced to go on a blind date with Miss Shu. After all, my brother cared about looks. And she was good-looking. I still remembered that Miss Shu was a quiet and reserved person. Under my brother's pursuit, the two got married after dating for a while. The Ava family successfully got the capital injection from the Zhu family. At that time, my brother hated me very much and didn't shy away from expressing that I was a scheming woman. Didn't deserve to be his sister and had nothing to do with him, on various occasions. I also found out much later that one of the reasons why my brother chose Miss Shu was that she looked a bit like my sister from the side. When I learned about this, I was so speechless that I could hardly speak. It was actually a substitute story. Since I already knew about this, of course I couldn't just watch Miss Shu fall into the wolf's den. Just when I was still thinking about what to do, the detective who had been following my sister told me a piece of news. My sister found the hotel manager where my brother's engagement was held and seemed to want to add some kind of drug. Following the clues, it turned out that she wanted to drug me and a scumbag during my brother's wedding ceremony and had also contacted the media to catch us in bed. I looked at the investigation materials and couldn't help laughing. In this new life, my sister's means of revenge were still so childish and low. The wedding day was grand, and all the well-known families came. I still attended it. My mother looked at me with a very complicated look in her eyes. And my father snorted coldly. You still know to come back? I was in a good mood and ignored his barking. My sister showed up on Dylan's arm. As soon as she appeared, she clung tightly to Dylan, as if to show how affectionate they were. Sister, you're here? Dylan and I are also going to prepare for our wedding soon. While saying this, she looked at me provocatively. I nodded vigorously, then I wish you a happy marriage for 100 years. Seeing that I didn't react much, my sister was originally gnashing her teeth. But when she saw me drink the wine, she smiled with a bit of excitement. What she didn't know was that I had already arranged for someone to switch my wine with hers. I stood in the corner with a wine glass in my hand and just watched my brother keep looking in my sister's direction, with his affection in his eyes impossible to hide. What a lovesick person. During the intermission of the wedding, the bride and groom went back to change clothes. But they didn't come back for a long time. Just when everyone was puzzled, suddenly a scream broke the silent atmosphere. Ah! What's this? Everyone followed the sound. They saw my sister and my brother hugging each other with their clothes in disarray in a guest room. After seeing people gathering around, my sister seemed to wake up and looked at my brother in panic. What's going on? How could it be me? No, no. My brother was also very surprised. And then a hint of joy flashed in his eyes. He subconsciously covered my sister with the quilt, but he himself was naked from the waist down, which was rather indecent. The reporters outside swarmed like bees smelling honey and kept taking pictures of the scene on the bed. Miss Shu took 2 steps back in shock, shook her head in disbelief, and finally stomped her foot and left. My father was so angry, and he pointed at my brother with his trembling hand. You 2 bastards. My mother fainted from anger on the spot. Now, my brother's marriage with Miss Shu was completely ruined, and they also became the laughingstock in the circle. Even on the hot search, the gossip about them was often at the top, which caused the stock price of the Ava family company to plummet. After all, my parents had always claimed that my sister was like their biological daughter. Now that their biological daughter and son were involved in such a thing, Dylan came to find me once later. The message he sent was, I know you've also been reborn. This made me curious. So I agreed. In the coffee shop downstairs of the company, Dylan looked so decadent, completely without the air of a noble young master as before. Seeing me coming, there was actually a glint of longing in Dylan's eyes. Actually, after you died in the previous life, I regretted it. I never got married for the rest of my life. I was speechless. Was this man's mind only filled with love affairs? Did he think that I still loved him in the later part of my previous life? Do I care whether you regret it or not? If this were really an novel about a man who couldn't get the woman he loved and finally turned around and apologized, it seemed that I should forgive him. Then we would continue to live happily together. I sneered, "You're like a rotten cucumber. What right do you have to ask me to forgive you?" Unfortunately, my life isn't a novel. And I'm not the female led in a tragic love story. Looking at my cold appearance, Dylan was stunned for a moment. And then he reacted and his tone became low. "I know you hate me. It's all my fault." I nodded and asked with a bit of pity, "Of course. You're with the Candy you've always been longing for in this life. Are you happy?" Thinking about the current situation, Dylan gritted his teeth with hatred. "That bitch. It's all her fault. Otherwise, we wouldn't." I just listened to him rambling on a lot of bullshit like, "I love you." Finally, I got impatient. "If you just want to say these things, then I'll leave." Dylan opened his mouth embarrassedly. "Don't you have anything to say?" I raised my eyebrows. "It's like you only come to offer help when it's too late. Why didn't you do something earlier? I'll just respect and bless you now." At the end of that day, it seemed that Dylan even cried. After saying goodbye to Dylan that day, he kept sending me text messages and gifts every day. But I rejected them all. However, in recent days, Mom had been calling me frequently. At first, I refused to answer the calls. Later, I was so annoyed that I finally picked up. On the other end of the phone was Mom's sobbing voice. "Ava, at unfulfilled land session. What should we do? Your brother insists on marrying Candy. I don't even know when this bastard got such an idea. How could they be together? They grew up as brother and sister. Your father has locked your brother up and even beaten and scolded him. But he just won't listen." I held the phone a little farther away and said in a cold tone, "Then why are you telling me this?" Mom paused for a moment. "Well, aren't you also my daughter?" I said slowly. "How could that be? Isn't your only daughter Candy? What does it have to do with me?" Then I directly blocked Mom's number. And finally it was much quieter. I heard that in the end, my brother threatened to commit suicide, which finally made our parents agree to his marriage with my sister. To my surprise, Candy actually gave up Dylan, her true love, in this life, and agreed to marry my brother instead. I was quite surprised at first. But then I understood after thinking about it. My sister was cheated by a scumbag in her previous life. And in this life, she wanted to succeed and be wealthy. Although her way was to rely on men. Since Dylan was no longer an option for her, why wouldn't she just cling to my brother instead? Well, as her sister, why not give her a wedding gift? When I arrived at the wedding scene, Dylan was drinking alone in the corner with a lonely look on his face. Many people around were talking about him, mostly about how he had been cuckolded. Seeing me coming, his eyes flickered, and he wanted to come over, but then stopped. I laughed secretly in my heart. This is the woman you've loved all your life. Your true love. Regarding this wedding, more people were also laughing at the Ava family. When Mom saw me, her eyes immediately turned red. "Ava, you're finally here. Why did you block me these days? I've called you so many times." Even Father's attitude towards me became much better. It was as if I wasn't the daughter they disliked before. I quickly made a stop gesture. "Don't be like Miss. Your hypocrisy makes me sick." Mom's tears welled up in her eyes but couldn't fall. Father subconsciously wanted to put on airs, but finally held back and just said, "In the future, you'd better move back home." Oh, so they finally realized my sister's flaws and started to want to build a relationship with me? I didn't reply because out of the corner of my eye, I saw someone. I knew that the big surprise gift I gave to my sister was coming soon. My sister's boyfriend Rex is not a good person at all. Although he does look handsome in a ruffian way and is tall, he's actually a real scumbag inside. When my sister first came back, I hired someone to investigate Rex's situation. My sister should have secretly packed her bags and left Rex. After Rex made a token effort to look for her, he didn't care anymore and was now loafing around and addicted to gambling. The person I sent secretly told Rex that my sister had gone back home and was about to marry my brother. Sure enough. At my sister and brother's wedding, he rushed in angrily with a knife. I hadn't forgotten that in the previous life, my sister pushed me out to take the knife for her. When my sister, wearing a wedding dress, was about to say, "I do," under the guidance of the master of ceremonies, Rex rushed over with the knife and roared loudly. "You bitch! How dare you run away with my money? Your body belongs to me. You slut!" Seeing this scene, my sister's pupils dilated in fear, and then she did the same thing as in her previous life. She pushed my brother out. My brother looked at my sister in shock and wanted to say something. But unfortunately, he had already been stabbed by Rex again and fell into a pool of blood. The wedding scene was in an uproar. Mom screamed in horror when she saw this scene. And Dad quickly dialed the emergency number. I quietly left the crowd. My brother should be happy. Right? After all, this was the wedding scene with his first love whom he had always cherished in his heart. Rex was directly arrested and put into prison. After my brother was sent to the hospital, I heard that after several days of rescue, he finally got out of the critical period. But due to serious kidney damage, one of his kidneys was removed. I deliberately went to the hospital at this time. Coincidentally, both my parents and my sister were there. The atmosphere was a bit strange. Perhaps because there had been too many successive blows during this period. I noticed that father had some gray hair. Mom's eyes were swollen from crying. My sister was smiling ingratiatingly at my brother. But my brother turned his face away and didn't appreciate it at all. Mom even started scolding, "You jinx. Who asked you to come? Get out." Oh, now the unlucky fate has been passed on to someone else. Who would have thought that just a few months ago, they were still a loving family? When my brother saw me, he still didn't have a bit expression on his face. However, Mom was very eager to be nice to me. I didn't care, everyone's here. I'm here to tell you something. Looking at Mom's puzzled eyes, I took out a paternity test certificate. I've always been curious about why Grandpa and Grandma insisted on sending me to the Taoist temple and adopting my sister instead. Now I understand. The paternity test clearly stated that my sister and father were related by blood. I had been wondering before. After all, father's family was a scholarly family. Were they really so feudal and superstitious that they had to send me away? So as soon as I came back, I hired a detective to investigate. It turned out that father had slept with another woman when mother was pregnant. When that woman got pregnant and came to father originally wanted to give her some money to send her away. But unfortunately, that woman also fell seriously ill and her only request was to let her daughter be raised in the Ava family where she would make a big fuss. Just when mother was about to give birth, father and grandpa and grandma came up with this idea. Otherwise, under normal circumstances, how could mother be willing to raise my sister after knowing that she was an illegitimate daughter? After carefully reading the investigation report, mother was as if struck by lightning. Her eyes gradually turned red, and in grief and anger, she slapped father directly. This woman who had lived in a honeypot all her life finally had to face the reality. Father wanted to defend himself but stammered and couldn't say anything. My brother was also stunned and stood there motionless like a statue. Well, now it's really a case of lovers turning into siblings. My sister reacted and quickly accused me. "This must be forged by you. Sister." I spread my hands and pretended to be innocent. "You can go to the official agency to test it again." Seeing that I was so confident, my brother was completely enraged. "So you're actually the daughter of a mistress. Who do you think you are? How dare you push me to block the knife? Bitch. Come here. I'll beat you to death." Finally, having fulfilled my obsession, I left that chaotic scene. After all, Mom almost wanted to beat Dad to death. I heard that when Mom went back, she demanded a divorce, which made Dad unable to focus on the company's affairs. And after my brother was discharged from the hospital, he couldn't overwork either. The mismanagement led to the decline and sharp shrinkage of the Ava family's company's stock price. And my sister was driven out of the house and disappeared without a trace. The Ava family began to publicize that I was their only daughter. Mom tried to build a relationship with me many times later. But I refused all of them. Mom often changed numbers to send me messages. Ava, do you still remember how cute you were when you were a child? Mom felt like she was holding the whole world when holding you. Ava, I've sorted out your things since high school. I miss you so much. Other, could you please reply to Mom's messages? I just treated it as watching a show. As for my brother, I only saw him once at a banquet. At that time, I was surrounded by people in the center of the banquet, while my brother and father could only stay in the corner, staring at me blankly. They had expressions like stray dogs on their faces. The last time I saw my sister was beside a roadside trash can. My sister was eating garbage while pulling her hair in despair and muttering to herself, "No. Impossible. I'm reborn. I'm the chosen one. How could I end up like this? It's all that bitch Ava's fault. I'm the only daughter of the Ava family." I drove away in my luxury car. I couldn't be late for an industry summit today. By the way, at the summit, I also saw Dylan. He was flattering a middle-aged man and saying something beside him. Our identities now were worlds apart.